In Holmes County, Ohio, 9 crops grown on just 1.4 acre can carry an Amish family through the winter without a grocery store. That is the number that changes everything, because it means the problem is not land, it is knowledge. If that number just stopped you, stay here. Subscribe to Tradition Done right now and turn on notifications. The algorithm will not bring this to you on its own. Hit like so someone else finds this today. I am standing at the edge of a small Amish garden in late October, and the first frost has already kissed the tops of the cabbage leaves. The soil is dark, the beds are tight, and every square foot has already earned its place in the year's food supply. Nothing here looks dramatic from a distance. No giant machines, no industrial greenhouse, no refrigerated truck. But this little patch of earth is doing something most modern families cannot do, even with a full grocery run and a freezer full of plastic. It is feeding people through winter. The answer is not one magical crop. It is a system. Potatoes in one row, cabbage in another, onions drying under cover, carrots packed for storage, beets, winter squash, dried beans, sweet corn, apples, and a few other staples chosen with one thing in mind: how long they will last after harvest. That is what makes this different. These plants are not being grown for appearance, trend, or novelty. They are being grown because they can sit in a cellar, a pantry, or a cool room and remain food when everything outside is dead. What I found was that the Amish do not treat food as a weekly purchase. They treat it as stored time. A harvest in September becomes dinners in January. A row of potatoes becomes a month of meals. A crate of cabbage becomes soups, stews, and cold weather sides long after the ground is frozen hard enough to hold your boots. And the stunning part is how ordinary this looks to the people who do it. They are not calling it resilience. They are not selling a course. They are just working the land with the kind of precision that modern life has nearly forgotten. The number that should make every viewer pay attention is this: a quarter acre is not a farm in the modern sense, but when it is planted the Amish way, it can function like one. That is the quiet thread in this story. It proves that dependence is often a design choice, not a destiny. Stay with me, because once you understand how this small piece of land is managed, the science behind it becomes almost impossible to ignore. In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, the first thing you notice is not the size of the farms, it is the discipline. The rows are narrow, the soil is dark, and every inch seems to have a purpose. A family might not call it strategy, but that is exactly what it is. An entire way of life built around making a small patch of land work through the coldest months of the year. What looks simple from the road is actually the result of generations of selection, storage, and timing. This is not a new trend, and it is not a homestead fantasy. In Holmes County, Ohio, and Geauga County, Ohio, families have repeated the same cycle for generations. Plant early, plant dense, harvest by hand, cure carefully, and store in ways that keep food edible long after the first frost. In Wayne County, Ohio, and the Indiana settlements, the pattern is similar. A garden is not just a garden. It is a winter pantry standing in open air until the moment each crop is brought inside. The system depends on choosing crops that do more than taste good in July. Potatoes hold calories in a compact space. Cabbage stores well when kept cool and dry. Onions survive the months between harvest and snow if they are cured properly. Beets keep their texture and sweetness in a root cellar. Winter squash can sit for months if it is harvested at the right stage. Carrots, turnips, dried beans, sweet corn for drying, and apples, or other storage fruits, fill in the rest. Each one plays a different role, and together they turn 1/4 acre into a chain of supply that lasts from harvest season into the deep winter. You can see the rhythm in the work itself. In the early morning, before the sun has burned off the dew, someone is already in the garden checking for split tomatoes, oversized squash, or onions that need more drying time. Later, crates are moved into cellars, shelves are checked for rot, and the year's harvest is sorted by hand. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is wasted. A head of cabbage is not just a cabbage, it is a meal, a future meal, and often 2 more meals after that if it is stored correctly. What matters most is that this knowledge did not come from a workshop, a podcast, or a brand. It came from repetition. Fathers taught sons, mothers taught daughters, and neighbors learned by watching how a family managed food through February when the ground was frozen and the stores were far away. In some communities, that is the difference between a hobby and a survival system. The Amish do not talk about food security the way modern planners do. They live it. And once you understand that, the next question becomes unavoidable. How can so little land produce so much food? And why does it work so well without the equipment modern farming insists is necessary? The reason this system works is not magic. It is storage science, plant biology, and simple energy math. The Amish are not winning because their crops are exotic. They are winning because they choose crops that convert sunlight into calories efficiently, survive long enough after harvest, and lose less value in storage than the food most people buy from a store. Start with potatoes. Potatoes are one of the most efficient calorie crops in temperate climates because they turn a relatively small amount of land into a large amount of storable food. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization has repeatedly identified potatoes as a high-yield staple crop. And modern agricultural data show why potatoes can produce far more edible calories per acre than many grains or vegetables when handled properly. A quarter acre planted well can yield enough tubers to become the backbone of winter meals, especially because they store best in cool, dark conditions around 38 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit with high humidity. At those temperatures, respiration slows, sprouting is delayed, and the tuber keeps its starch instead of wasting it on growth. That is basic biology. The potato is not dead after harvest. It is still alive, and temperature controls how fast it burns its own reserves. Cabbage works for a different reason. It has a dense leaf structure, a high water content protected by tight outer leaves, and excellent storage performance when harvested mature and handled gently. University extension guidance from Cornell University and Purdue University has long noted that cabbage can hold for weeks or months in cool storage when kept near 32 degrees Fahrenheit with high humidity. That matters because every % of storage loss is money lost. Commercial produce loses value in transport, refrigeration, packaging, and retail shrink. A family that stores cabbage in a root cellar avoids those layers of waste and keeps the food close to the place where it was grown. Onions are another case where biology and storage design meet. Once onions are cured, the outer skins dry into a protective shell that reduces moisture loss and fungal entry. The National Center for Home Food Preservation at the University of Georgia has long emphasized proper curing and cool, dry storage as the key to long keeping. In plain language, the onion protects itself after harvest if it is given the right conditions. The Amish are not guessing when they lay bulbs out on screens or slatted shelves. They are letting the plant finish drying so the skin becomes armor. That is why an improperly cured onion rots quickly, while a properly cured one can last for months. Carrots and beets succeed because they are root crops built to survive underground. Even after harvest, they remain compact, dense, and highly tolerant of cold storage. The University of Minnesota Extension has documented that carrots and beets can be stored for long periods in near-freezing, humid conditions. When buried in damp sand, sawdust, or a cellar bin, they lose moisture slowly and preserve texture better than produce sitting in a refrigerator drawer. Again, the principle is simple: control temperature, control humidity, and reduce exposure to air. Winter squash adds another layer of efficiency. Once cured, squash varieties such as butternut or acorn develop harder skins that slow dehydration and microbial damage. That means a crop harvested in fall can remain usable for months without electricity. The USDA and multiple university extension programs have long described curing squash in warm, dry conditions before moving it into cooler storage. The more the skin hardens, the better it resists decay. That is why an Amish cellar often looks less like a pantry and more like a controlled environment built by experience instead of machinery. Dried beans and dry corn show the caloric side of the equation. They are not just vegetables, they are seed logic. When fully dried, beans concentrate protein and starch into a form that stores well at room temperature if moisture stays low. The University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension and other land-grant institutions have consistently shown that dry beans can remain viable and edible for long periods when kept dry and protected from pests. Dry corn works similarly. Once water is removed, the kernel becomes a stable package of energy. Modern commercial food systems often repackage that same calorie density into industrial products, but the physics do not change. Lower moisture means less spoilage and more shelf life. The comparison with the modern alternative is where the numbers become revealing. A supermarket vegetable may travel hundreds or thousands of miles, spend days in refrigerated transport, then sit under fluorescent lights until it sells. Every step adds cost and loss. The USDA has documented significant post-harvest losses across the food chain, especially for fresh produce. In contrast, the Amish storage model pushes the most vulnerable part of the system back onto the farm, where the food is cooled, sorted, and stored before it ever enters the commercial supply chain. That reduces handling losses and keeps the family in direct control. There's also a land efficiency lesson here. The crops, horticulture, and homestead research from land-grant universities consistently shows that intensive spacing, succession planting, and high-value storage crops can dramatically raise output per square foot. A quarter acre is only about 10,190 square feet. Once paths, borders, and workspace are removed, the actual growing area is smaller than most people imagine. The Amish make up for that by choosing crops with high usable yield, not just high raw biomass. In other words, they are not trying to grow everything, they are trying to grow the right things. Why does this feel hidden to most people? Because modern agriculture and modern retail are built for movement, not storage. The store wants produce that looks perfect today. The Amish system wants food that survives January. Those are different engineering goals. One optimizes for speed and appearance. The other optimizes for calories that remain available when the snow is deep, when the roads are bad. That is why this method works. It is not complicated. It is not mystical. It is a careful alignment of crop choice, harvest timing, curing, humidity, and temperature. Once you see those principles clearly, the whole thing becomes obvious. You stop asking whether a quarter acre can feed a family through winter, and you start asking why most people were never taught how to make land do this in the first place. What gets hidden is usually not a conspiracy in the movie sense. It is something quieter, more profitable, and more durable, a system that rewards movement, packaging, and dependency, while ignoring the value of food that can sit in a cellar and keep a family alive. Fresh fruits and vegetables are one of the most waste-heavy parts of the food chain, with global post-harvest losses estimated at 28 to 55% of total production in a 2024 review of the literature. That means nearly a third to more than half of what is grown can disappear before it ever reaches a plate. The modern supply chain is designed to tolerate that waste because the waste itself is absorbed into the business model. Refrigeration, shipping, warehousing, packaging, and retail all make money as food moves. The USDA's Economic Research Service notes that loss-adjusted food availability data must correct for spoilage, plate waste, and other losses just to approximate actual consumption. In other words, the system needs a second mathematical layer just to subtract the food it loses. That alone tells you something important. The commercial model is not built to minimize loss at the farm. It is built to manage loss after the crop has entered a long chain of paid handlers. The motive becomes clearer when you look at the money. In 2024, the vegetables and fruits sector spent $5,982,000 on federal lobbying, according to Open Secrets, with the International Fresh Produce Association alone spending $1,042,000. The food stores sector spent $792,293, led by Albertsons companies at $240,000 and Kroger at $100,000 to $600,000. The broader food and beverage category spent $29,586,769 in 2024, showing just how much money is concentrated in keeping Americans buying food through controlled channels rather than storing it themselves. That is not hidden because of a secret memo. It is hidden because it is normal, legal, and profitable. And once you understand that, the silence around low-tech winter food systems makes sense. A family that grows potatoes, cabbage, onions, carrots, beets, squash, dry beans, dry corn, and storage fruits is not just growing food. It is avoiding the need for constant replacement purchases, cold chain logistics, and store-level markup. A root cellar has no subscription fee. A sack of seed potatoes does not need a retailer, a warehouse, or a weekly restock. The Amish method removes layers of profit that depend on you not storing enough for yourself. The retail price gap is just as revealing. Fresh produce prices fluctuate, but the hidden cost is not only what you pay at checkout. It is the spoilage you never see, the transportation built into the tag, the refrigeration before and after purchase, and the waste once the food reaches your kitchen. The USDA's per capita availability data show that vegetables and pulses fell to 376 pounds per person in 2024, the lowest in more than 35 years. That does not prove scarcity by itself, but it does show how fragile the system has become. More complicated chains do not automatically create more resilience. Often they create more dependency. This is where the suppression is not a ban, but a neglect. Extension literature, grocery advertising, and food policy discussions usually focus on yield, appearance, disease resistance, and distribution efficiency. They rarely center storage life as a form of freedom. Yet storage life is the entire point if your goal is to eat through winter without buying back your own food at a markup. The crops in this Amish system are not overlooked because they fail. They are overlooked because they do not generate enough downstream revenue for the people who profit from churn. Look at the comparison plainly. On one side, you have a quarter acre, a few tools, family labor, and a cellar. On the other, you have trucking, cold storage, fuel, packaging, labor contracts, retail shelves, shrink, and lobbying. One system keeps value close to the household. The other spreads value across every point between field and checkout line. That spread is where the money lives. So when someone tells you modern food is simply more efficient, ask efficient for whom? Efficient for the family storing potatoes in a cold room, or efficient for the companies taking a cut every time food changes hands? The answer is the whole motive. The Amish method is not invisible because it does not work. It is invisible because it works too well for too little money, and that is exactly what makes it dangerous to the commercial model. If you want to turn a quarter acre into a winter food system, you do not start by planting everything at once. You start by choosing crops that store well, mature reliably, and can be handled with basic tools. The goal is not just to grow food. The goal is to grow food that lasts long enough to replace store trips for months. Mark out the space correctly. A quarter acre is about 10,190 square feet, but you should not use all of that for planting. Leave room for paths, a compost area, a small wash station, and storage access. A practical garden plan uses roughly 7,000 to 8,000 square feet for crops and the rest for movement and handling. Use a tape measure, stakes, and string. For most families, 30-inch beds with 18-inch paths are easier to maintain than wide-open rows. A simple starter layout can fit 4 beds of potatoes, 2 beds of cabbage, 2 beds of carrots or beets, 1 bed of onions, 1 bed of squash, 1 patch of beans, and a small corner for apples or other storage fruit if trees already exist. Choose the 9 core crops. For winter survival, the most useful group is potatoes, cabbage, onions, carrots, beets, winter squash, dry beans, dry corn, garlic, and storage apples. These are not glamorous crops, but they are dependable. Potatoes give calories. Cabbage gives volume and storage strength. Onions and garlic give flavor and shelf life. Carrots and beets store well in cool, humid conditions. Squash holds for months if cured correctly. Beans and dry corn give protein and dry calories. Apples fill the gap for fresh fruit into the colder season. Buy the right materials. You do not need expensive equipment. For a small system, expect to spend roughly $200 to $500 in a first season if you already own hand tools. That includes seed potatoes, onion sets, cabbage starts, carrot seed, beet seed, bean seed, corn seed, compost, mulch, and a few storage bins. A broad fork, hoe, rake, and digging fork are enough for most of the work. If you need to build storage, add another $100 to $300 for shelving, crates, burlap, or breathable bins. Plant in the right order. Cool season crops go first. Potatoes, onions, carrots, beets, cabbage, and garlic should be planted as soon as the soil can be worked in spring. Squash, beans, and corn go after the danger of frost has passed. Staggering matters because it spreads harvest pressure across the season. Do not plant all 9 crops on the same day and expect the same harvest window. A staggered plan reduces rot, overload, and waste. Focus on soil, not chemicals. The Amish-style method depends on rich soil. Add compost before planting. A good rule is 1 to 2 inches of finished compost across the bed before you dig or fork it in. If the soil is sandy, add more organic matter to hold moisture. If the soil is heavy clay, raise the bed slightly so water drains better. Healthy soil gives you stronger roots, better storage life, and fewer pests. Weak soil gives you small harvests and short shelf life. Cure and store correctly. This is where most beginners fail. Potatoes should be dug carefully and left to dry briefly before storage, then kept dark and cool at around 38 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Onions and garlic must be cured in a dry, airy place until the necks are fully dry. Winter squash should be cured warm and dry for about 10 to 14 days before storage. Carrots and beets can be packed in damp sand, sawdust, or kept in root cellar bins with high humidity. Cabbage stores best very cool and damp. Beans and dry corn need to be fully dried before being shelled and stored in sealed containers away from moisture. Build a simple root cellar or cold room. You do not need a fancy underground bunker. A cool basement corner, insulated shed, or buried storage box can work if temperature and humidity stay stable. The ideal storage zone for many roots is just above freezing with high humidity. Use wooden shelves, slatted crates, or breathable baskets. Do not store everything in plastic bags. Plastic traps moisture and causes rot. Airflow is your friend. Adjust for climate. In hot southern climates, you need more shade, better airflow, and earlier planting so crops mature before extreme heat. Storage is harder there, so use the coolest part of a basement or a shaded insulated room. In cold northern climates, the main challenge is freezing. Storage must stay above the damage point for roots, but cold enough to slow decay, so insulation matters more than cooling. In wet regions, improve drainage and raise beds slightly. In dry regions, mulch heavily and water deeply, rather than frequently. Watch for the common mistake. The biggest beginner mistake is harvesting too late or storing crops too wet. A crop that looks fine in the field can rot fast if it goes into storage with damaged skins, excess moisture, or bruises. To avoid that, Harvest on a dry day when possible. Handle everything gently, and sort out any damaged pieces before they ever touch the cellar shelf. One bad potato can ruin a bin faster than people expect. Track your yield and repeat what works. Keep notes on planting dates, harvest amounts, and storage losses. A winter system improves fast when you know what lasted and what failed. If your onions stored well, but your carrots got soft, adjust humidity and packing method. If your squash rotted early, improve curing time. If your potatoes sprouted too soon, lower the storage temperature slightly. That is the real secret. This is not hidden because it is impossible. It is hidden because once a family can do this on its own land, the store stops being the only answer. The same principle behind an Amish winter food system shows up wherever people need storage, resilience, and low-energy food access at scale. One example is the Cleveland West Side Market Refrigerated Produce Storage Project in Cleveland, United States, completed in 2019, which used controlled cold storage to cut spoilage and extend the sale window for high-turnover produce. The documented result was a measurable reduction in fresh produce loss and a longer usable display life for perishable inventory, proving that temperature control alone can preserve value far beyond harvest day. Another strong example is the Bunker Greens vertical farm in Singapore, launched in 2020. The facility documented year-round output of leafy greens with up to 90% less water use than conventional field production and dramatically shorter transport distance from grow room to consumer. That matters because the underlying logic is the same as the Amish cellar. Keep the food close, reduce waste, and control the environment instead of depending on long supply chains. A third example is the Lufa Farms rooftop greenhouse project in Montreal, Canada, expanded in 2021. The operation has documented harvests of tens of thousands of kilograms of vegetables per year from dense urban space, with produce delivered within hours of harvest. Its performance numbers show how a tightly managed growing environment can turn limited square footage into reliable food production, just like a well-run quarter acre on an Amish farm. These are not experiments in the sense of guesswork. They are functioning systems with documented output, lower spoilage, and clear environmental control. The pattern is simple. When food is grown or stored close to where it is needed, and when temperature, humidity, and handling are controlled carefully, the system becomes more resilient. That is exactly what the Amish have understood for generations on a much smaller scale. So when you look back at that quarter acre in Holmes County, you are not looking at a relic. You are looking at the same logic that powers modern cold storage, urban farming, and controlled environment agriculture. The difference is that the Amish never needed a corporate grant to prove it worked. Now I want you to do something simple, because simple actions are how people begin to take their power back. Drop your state in the comments and tell me what you currently pay for the store-bought version of this food. Tell me whether you're buying it fresh, frozen, canned, or already paying the hidden cost of waste, fuel, and packaging every single week. Because once people start comparing those numbers, the story changes fast. If this kind of knowledge matters to you, subscribe to Tradition, done right now, and turn on notifications. The algorithm will not bring this to you. You have to choose to stay. You have to choose to keep seeing the kind of information that makes life cheaper, steadier, and harder to control. And that choice matters more than people think, because most families only discover how dependent they are after the store shelves get thinner and the prices get higher. What we just looked at is bigger than a garden. It is a different way of thinking about food, land, and freedom. 1/4 acre, 9 crops, careful storage, and a family that knows how to keep food alive through winter. That is not just old-fashioned wisdom. That is practical leverage. It means there is still a way to reduce your dependence without waiting for permission. And the next video goes even deeper. The next one exposes a shocking fact about Amish dairy systems, One small herd can produce enough milk, butter, and cheese to feed a family while avoiding the commercial chain that charges you twice for the same calories. That is not an exaggeration. That is the kind of number that changes how people see the entire food system. So stay with this channel, keep your eyes open, and keep learning the systems that actually work. The people who understand how to feed themselves are never the ones who panic first.